Listen, you had me at Ben Affleck.
I saw that going differently in my mind.
Hi, I'm LadyJenevia. Today's video is a review of the new Robert Rodriguez film, Hypnotic. A bit of a quick backstory. I had requested a screener of this a while back. I don't remember exactly when I sent the email, but suffice it to say, it was long enough ago that I assumed I would not be getting any type of access. No screener, no interviews, just a whole lot of nothing. Then tell me why I get an email on May 9th telling me, here's the screener, the review embargo lifts May 10th, movie is released on May 12th. Not to sound ungrateful, but was there no way to let me have a little bit more time to work on this? I know we're down to the wire here, but let's talk about it anyway. I was shocked when I looked at the roster of May releases and saw that there was going to be a new Robert Rodriguez film starring Ben Affleck of all people, because I had heard nothing about it beforehand. Even now, at the time of recording this video, I have seen no promotion for this film. The only reason I knew it existed was because I'm someone who goes out of my way to try to find a bit more information about what's coming out in the coming months so I can get a sense of what it is that I would potentially like to cover here on my channel. The basic premise of Hypnotic is as follows. Determined to find his missing daughter, Austin detective Danny Rourke, that's Ben Affleck's character, instead finds himself spiraling down a rabbit hole while investigating a series of reality-bending bank robberies where he will ultimately call into question his most basic assumptions about everything and everyone in his world. Aided by Diana Cruz, that's Alice Braga's character, an unnervingly gifted psychic, Rourke simultaneously pursues and is pursued by a lethal specter, that's William Fichtner's character, the one he believes holds the key to finding the missing girl, only to discover more than he ever bargained for. One very important thing I would say about this film before I start giving my feedback of it is, do not look this film up. The entire plot has already been revealed online, even though in the email it says don't reveal spoilers, and I think it's a story better to experience with zero spoilers if at all possible to avoid them before your first watch. When I first started watching Hypnotic, I was a bit confused by the overall vibe and presentation. I think that myself and a lot of viewers in general associate a more flashy filmmaking style of the overall aesthetic, cinematography, and editing for Robert Rodriguez. This felt comparably more natural, and this is an independent film with a smaller budget, and that was noticeable. Considering how large of a name Robert Rodriguez is, my own expectations were definitely working against me when I first started. Even more so when you factor in things like the larger trend we have nowadays towards big genre blockbusters, people with superpowers or super abilities. You just have this more expensive picture in mind as a viewer. That's what our current frame of reference is. So since this film was something I was watching as a press screener at home, I had the ability to pause it, which I did. I paused it and I quickly looked up a Robert Rodriguez interview about the film, and once I read a little bit more about him explaining that this had started as an idea he had for a good 20 years and that he ultimately opted to sell this idea through a more independent means of funding and production so that he would be able to have more creative freedom than if he were to sell this idea to a larger buyer that, yes, would pump more money in, but in return would also demand more control and input into altering his original idea. That really helped my vision and my understanding of Hypnotic to become more clear. And then I resumed watching the film and it was like everything clicked. I actually got excited by the way that they approached telling the story and worked around the budget being smaller. For example, the powers that we see, those being ones that manipulate a person's perception of reality, you only really have to have these actors scrunching their faces up a little bit, hold the camera on them, and add some audio cues so that we can know that the powers are being used. And it's actually a really clever way to visually translate a concept that would normally be done nowadays with a much more expensive packaging. We get some visual effects that are noticeable and more reminiscent of what you would expect to see in reality-bending blockbusters like Inception or perhaps a Doctor Strange film, but in general, those were used very sparingly throughout the film's run. Now I want to elaborate just a bit more on why I've ultimately landed at a place now that I've seen the film in its entirety where I ended up really enjoying it. Regardless of the slow start that I personally had to the film, I'm happy with it as a complete story and journey. What I came to realize by the time I was about midway through the film is that this really felt like I was watching something from the 90s, or to be fair, maybe also the 1980s. I don't know if anyone watching this video remembers a film that came out a couple of years ago called Those Who Wish Me Dead. It's an Angelina Jolie film where she is a firefighter, and more specifically a smoke jumper, and there's just this very simple, straightforward action thriller concept of her having to save a child from assassins. They're all running around the forest, and that's basically it. And this was a film that pretty consistently got a response from people online who are, at the very least, generationally speaking, millennials, that it was a film that felt reminiscent of decades past because you have a very simple, straightforward concept and a major star to lead the story. There's no fuss or bells and whistles, and it's kind of hard to elaborate on what I mean by this if you're not used to seeing these types of films, but in recent years we've seen the mid-budget movies, unfortunately, fall off quite a bit. And I'm not happy about this. I like those films. I would like for there to be a variety of options of genre and budget to choose from as a viewer. I don't want to see major A-list names only chasing down gigs that are IP blockbusters or so-called award show bait. Hypnotic has more of a sci-fi twist to it than Those Who Wish Me Dead because you have that super powered element to it, but there is a similar tone, and the fact that this film is only an hour and a half, there isn't much downtime or filler. You jump into the action pretty quickly. So you get, here's the premise, let's have the protagonist go on the job, and now you're just right in the thick of things. I appreciate the amount of layers that get peeled back as well. Truly, Hypnotic is a Shrek sequel with all the onion layers you pick back one by one the further you progress into the story. Now, I'm sure that there are cynical critics who will complain about which of these layers they were able to figure out ahead of time, but I don't think that figuring out one or more of those developments early is necessarily a bad thing. There was one thing that I was thinking to myself while watching the film where I had this thought of, well, that doesn't seem right. Just look at this and look at that, and the math is not mathing. And sure enough, there was a development in the story, a layer peeled back that made it completely make sense for me to think that what I was seeing didn't make sense the way that I was initially perceiving it. I don't know what it is, but there's something about watching hot people go on the run from danger that feels very 90s or 80s, and I hit a point where I just found myself really having fun with the concept and the nostalgic feeling of it. Additionally, without giving away major plot spoilers or specifics, I would say that the ending of the film hits an emotional note and emotional core that makes a lot of sense if you are familiar with Robert Rodriguez's work as a storyteller. And I'm not talking about you knowing a handful of his grittier R-rated action films from the 90s. I'm talking about a much larger perspective across his entire filmography. You hit the ending and you go, ah, yes, this is very Robert Rodriguez. Now, whether or not that works for you would probably vary depending on your preferences in storytelling, how you feel about Robert Rodriguez's works, and so on and so forth. But the emotional core of the story is that Ben Affleck is a daddy, and I'm not even saying that to be facetious or salacious. You can see, if you watch the trailer, that he's playing a man whose daughter has gone missing. It's the central thesis of his character, that he is a man who wants to find his daughter. Even though Ben has to be pretty serious for the majority of the runtime, there is a point in the story where he gets very emotional, and I found it to be really effective. I really did feel what he was trying to convey as an actor. I found him to be very convincing. And on a more lighthearted note, there was a different point in the film where his character just sassily shakes his head no. And I loved it so much. I want to get this film when it's finished, its theatrical run, and see if I can just clip that part and add it to my meme folder, because I found it to be delightful. In general, I respect what Robert Rodriguez has attempted to do with Hypnotic, as well as to what degree I think he achieved that. In general, I tend to enjoy a lot of Ben Affleck's performances that he's been doing over these last few years. He was a comedy icon in The Last Duel. I said what I said.
Come in. Take your pants off.
He's my favorite Batman. The Way Back was also very good, if anyone watching this saw that film, and I would be perfectly happy to see him stick to these more emotionally resonant stories. If you are able to see Hypnotic while it's out in the cinema, go check it out, and if not, then perhaps on home video or digital release, whatever method is more accessible to you. Thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I do still plan on doing Queen Charlotte reactions. I have filmed them already. I just have not had the time to sit down and edit them fully yet, but it's a work in progress, so just stick around and we'll see those when they're finished. See you in the next one. Bye.